Section 28 of Coningsby or the New Generation by Benjamin Disraeli. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 8, Chapter 3. Lord Monmouth was sitting in the same dressing room in which he was first introduced to the reader. On the table were several packets of papers that were open and in course of reference, and he dictated his observations to Monsieur Villebecque, who was writing at his left hand. Thus were they occupied when Coningsby was ushered into the room. 'You see, Harry,' said Lord Monmouth, 'that I am much occupied to day, yet the business on which I wish to communicate with you is so pressing that it could not be postponed.' He made a sign to Villebecque, and his secretary instantly retired. 'I was right in pressing your return to England,' continued Lord Monmouth to his grandson, who was a little anxious as to the impending communication, which he could not in any way anticipate. 'These are not times when young men should be out of sight. Your public career will commence immediately. The Government have resolved on a dissolution. My information is from the highest quarter. You may be astonished, but it is a fact. They are going to dissolve their own House of Commons. Notwithstanding this and the Queen's name, we can beat them. But the race requires the finest jockeying. We can't give a point. Tadpole has been here to me about Darlford. He came specially with a message, I may say an appeal, from one to whom I can refuse nothing. The Government count on the seat, though with the new registration 'tis nearly a tie. If we had a good candidate, we could win. But Rigby won't do. He is too much of the old clique, used up, a hack, besides a beaten horse. We are assured the name of Coningsby would be a host. There is a considerable section who support the present fellow who will not vote against a Coningsby. They have thought of you as a fit person, and I have approved of the suggestion. You will, therefore, be the candidate for Darlford with my entire sanction and support, and I have no doubt you will be successful. You may be sure I shall spare nothing, and it will be very gratifying to me, after being robbed of all our boroughs, that the only Coningsby who cares to enter Parliament should nevertheless be able to do so as early as I could fairly desire.' Coningsby, the rival of Mr. Millbank on the hustings of Darlford! Vanquished or victorious, equally a catastrophe. The fierce passions, the gross insults, the hot blood and the cool lies, the ruffianism and the ribaldry, perhaps the domestic discomfiture and mortification, which he was about to be the means of bringing on the roof he loved best in the world, occurred to him with anguish. The countenance of Edith, haughty and mournful last night, rose to him again. He saw her canvassing for her father, and against him. Madness! And for what was he to make this terrible and costly sacrifice? For his ambition? Not even for that divinity or demon for which we all immolate so much. Mighty ambition, forsooth, to succeed to the Rigbys! To enter the House of Commons a slave and a tool! To move according to instructions, and to labour for the low designs of petty spirits, without even the consolation of being a dupe! What sympathy could there exist between Coningsby and the great Conservative party, that for 10 years, in an age of revolution, had never promulgated a principle; whose only intelligible and consistent policy seemed to be an attempt, very grateful of course to the feelings of an English royalist, to revive Irish Puritanism; who, when in power in 1835, had used that power only to evince their utter ignorance of Church principles; and who were at this moment, when Coningsby was formally solicited to join their ranks, in open insurrection against the prerogatives of the English monarchy. 'Do you anticipate then an immediate dissolution, sir?' inquired Coningsby, after a moment's pause. 'We must anticipate it, though I think it is doubtful. It may be next month, it may be in the autumn. They may tide over another year, as Lord Eskdale thinks, and his opinion always weighs with me. He is very safe. Tadpole believes they will dissolve at once. But whether they dissolve now, or in a month's time, or in the autumn, or next year, our course is clear. We must declare our intentions immediately. We must hoist our flag. Monday next there is a great Conservative dinner at Darlford. You must attend it. That will be the finest opportunity in the world for you to announce yourself.' 'Don't you think, sir,' said Coningsby, 'that such an announcement would be rather premature? It is, in fact, embarking in a contest which may last a year, perhaps more.' 'What you say is very true,' said Lord Monmouth. 'No doubt it is very troublesome, very disgusting; any canvassing is. But we must take things as we find them. You cannot get into Parliament now in the good old gentlemanlike way, and we ought to be thankful that this interest has been fostered for our purpose.' Coningsby looked on the carpet, cleared his throat as if about to speak, and then gave something like a sigh. 'I think you had better be off the day after to morrow,' said Lord Monmouth. 'I have sent instructions to the steward to do all he can in so short a time, for I wish you to entertain the principal people.' 'You are most kind; you are always most kind to me, dear sir,' said Coningsby in a hesitating tone, and with an air of great embarrassment. 'But in truth I have no wish to enter Parliament.' 'What?' said Lord Monmouth. 'I feel that I am not sufficiently prepared for so great a responsibility as a seat in the House of Commons,' said Coningsby. 'Responsibility!' said Lord Monmouth, smiling. 'What responsibility is there? How can any one have a more agreeable seat? The only person to whom you are responsible is your own relation who brings you in; and I don't suppose there can be any difference on any point between us. You are certainly still young, but I was younger by nearly 2 years when I first went in, and I found no difficulty. There can be no difficulty. All you have to do is to vote with your party. As for speaking, if you have a talent that way, take my advice, don't be in a hurry. Learn to know the House, learn the House to know you. If a man be discreet, he cannot enter Parliament too soon.' 'It is not exactly that, sir,' said Coningsby. 'Then what is it, my dear Harry? You see to day I have much to do, yet as your business is pressing I would not postpone seeing you an hour. I thought you would have been very much gratified.' 'You mentioned that I had nothing to do but to vote with my party, sir,' replied Coningsby. 'You mean, of course, by that term what is understood by the Conservative party.' 'Of course; our friends.' 'I am sorry,' said Coningsby, rather pale, but speaking with firmness, 'I am sorry that I could not support the Conservative party.' 'By !' exclaimed Lord Monmouth, starting in his seat, 'some woman has got hold of him and made him a Whig.' 'No, my dear grandfather,' said Coningsby, scarcely able to repress a smile, serious as the interview was becoming. 'Nothing of the kind, I assure you. No person can be more anti Whig.' 'I don't know what you are driving at, sir,' said Lord Monmouth, in a hard, dry tone. 'I wish to be frank, sir,' said Coningsby, 'and I am very sensible of your goodness in permitting me to speak to you on the subject. What I mean to say is, that I have for a long time looked upon the Conservative party as a body who have betrayed their trust, more from ignorance, I admit, than from design, yet clearly a body of individuals totally unequal to the exigencies of the epoch, and indeed unconscious of its real character.' 'You mean giving up those Irish corporations?' said Lord Monmouth. 'Well, between ourselves, I am quite of the same opinion. But we must mount higher. We must go to 28 for the real mischief. But what is the use of lamenting the past? Peel is the only man, suited to the times and all that; at least we must say so, and try to believe so. We can't go back. And it is our own fault that we have let the chief power out of the hands of our own order. It was never thought of in the time of your great grandfather, sir; and if a commoner were for a season permitted to be the nominal Premier to do the detail, there was always a secret committee of great 1688 nobles to give him his instructions.' 'I should be very sorry to see secret committees of great 1688 nobles again,' said Coningsby. 'Then what the devil do you want to see?' said Lord Monmouth. 'Political faith,' said Coningsby, 'instead of political infidelity.' 'Said Lord Monmouth. 'Before I support Conservative principles,' continued Coningsby, 'I merely wish to be informed what those principles aim to conserve. It could not appear to be the prerogative of the Crown, since the principal portion of a Conservative oration now is an invective against a late royal act, which they describe as a bedchamber plot. Is it the Church which they wish to conserve? What is a threatened appropriation clause against an actual Church commission in the hands of parliamentary laymen? Could the Long Parliament have done worse? Well, then, if it is neither the Crown nor the Church whose rights and privileges this Conservative party propose to vindicate, is it your House, the House of Lords, whose powers they are prepared to uphold? Is it not notorious that the very man whom you have elected as your leader in that House declares among his Conservative adherents that henceforth the assembly that used to furnish those very committees of great Revolution nobles that you mention is to initiate nothing, and without a struggle is to subside into that undisturbed repose which resembles the imperial tranquillity that secured the frontiers by paying tribute?' 'All this is vastly fine,' said Lord Monmouth, 'but I see no means by which I can attain my object but by supporting Peel. After all, what is the end of all parties and all politics? To gain your object. I want to turn our coronet into a ducal one, and to get your grandmother's barony called out of abeyance in your favour. It is impossible that Peel can refuse me. I have already purchased an ample estate with a view of entailing it on you and your issue. You will make a considerable alliance. You may marry, if you please, Lady Theresa Sydney. I hear the report with pleasure. Count on my at once entering into any arrangement conducive to your happiness.' 'My dear grandfather, you have ever been to me only too kind and generous.' 'To whom should I be kind but to you, my own blood, that has never crossed me, and of whom I have reason to be proud? Yes, Harry, it gratifies me to hear you admired, and to learn your success. All I want now is to see you in Parliament. A man should be in Parliament early. There is a sort of stiffness about every man, no matter what may be his talents, who enters Parliament late in life. And now, fortunately, the occasion offers. You will go down on Friday, feed the notabilities well, speak out, praise Peel, abuse O'Connell and the ladies of the bedchamber, anathematise all waverers, say a good deal about Ireland, stick to the Irish Registration Bill, that's a good card. And above all, my dear Harry, don't spare that fellow Millbank. Remember, in turning him out, you not only gain a vote for the Conservative cause and our coronet, but you crush my foe. Spare nothing for that object. I count on you, boy.' 'I should grieve to be backward in anything that concerned your interest or your honour, sir,' said Coningsby, with an air of great embarrassment. 'I am sure you would, I am sure you would,' said Lord Monmouth, in a tone of some kindness. 'And I feel at this moment,' continued Coningsby, 'that there is no personal sacrifice which I am not prepared to make for them, except one. My interests, my affections, they should not be placed in the balance, if yours, sir, were at stake, though there are circumstances which might involve me in a position of as much mental distress as a man could well endure. But I claim for my convictions, my dear grandfather, a generous tolerance.' 'I can't follow you, sir,' said Lord Monmouth, again in his hard tone. 'Our interests are inseparable, and therefore there can never be any sacrifice of conduct on your part. What you mean by sacrifice of affections, I don't comprehend; but as for your opinions, you have no business to have any other than those I uphold. You are too young to form opinions.' 'I am sure I wish to express them with no unbecoming confidence,' replied Coningsby. 'I have never intruded them on your ear before. But this being an occasion when you yourself said, sir, I was about to commence my public career, I confess I thought it was my duty to be frank. I would not entail on myself long years of mortification by one of those ill considered entrances into political life which so many public men have cause to deplore. You go with your family, sir, like a gentleman. You are not to consider your opinions like a philosopher or a political adventurer. Yes, sir, said Coningsby, with animation, but men going with their families like gentlemen, and losing sight of every principle on which the society of this country ought to be established, produced the Reform Bill. Damn the Reform Bill, said Lord Monmouth. If the Duke had not quarrelled with Lord Grey on a coal committee, we should never have had the Reform Bill, and Grey would have gone to Ireland. You are in as great peril now as you were in 1830, said Coningsby. No, 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 said Lord Monmouth. The Tory party is organised now. They will not catch us napping again. These Conservative associations have done the business. But what are they organised for? Said Coningsby. At the best, to turn out the Whigs. And when you have turned out the Whigs, what then? You may get your ducal coronet, sir. But a duke now is not so great a man as a baron was but a century back. We cannot struggle against the irresistible stream of circumstances. Power has left our order. This is not an age for factitious aristocracy. As for my grandmother's barony, I should look upon the termination of its abeyance in my favour as the act of my political extinction. What we want, sir, is not to fashion new dukes and furbish up old baronies, but to establish great principles which may maintain the realm and secure the happiness of the people. Let me see authority once more honoured, a solemn reverence again the habit of our lives. Let me see property acknowledging, as in the old days of faith, that labour is his twin brother, and that the essence of all tenure is the performance of duty. Let results such as these be brought about, and let me participate, however feebly, in the great fulfilment, and public life then indeed becomes a noble career, and a seat in Parliament an enviable distinction. I tell you what it is, Harry, said Lord Monmouth, very drily. Members of this family may think as they like, but they must act as I please. You must go down to Friday to Darlford and declare yourself a candidate for the town, or I shall reconsider our mutual positions. I would say you must go to morrow, but it is only courteous to Rigby to give him a previous intimation of your movement, and that cannot be done to day. I sent for Rigby this morning on other business which now occupies me, and find he is out of town. He will return to morrow, and will be here at 3 o'clock, when you can meet him. You will meet him, I doubt not, like a man of sense,' added Lord Monmouth, looking at Coningsby with a glance such as he had never before encountered, 'who is not prepared to sacrifice all the objects of life for the pursuit of some fantastical puerilities.' His Lordship rang a bell on his table for Villebecque, and to prevent any further conversation, resumed his papers. Chapter 4. It would have been difficult for any person unconscious of crime to have felt more dejected than Coningsby when he rode out of the courtyard of Monmouth House. The love of Edith would have consoled him for the destruction of his prosperity. The proud fulfilment of his ambition might in time have proved some compensation for his crushed affections, but his present position seemed to offer no single source of solace. There came over him that irresistible conviction that is at times the dark room of all of us, that the bright period of our life is past, that a future awaits us only of anxiety, failure, mortification, despair, that none of our resplendent visions can ever be realised, and that we add but one more victim to the long and dreary catalogue of baffled aspirations. Nor could he indeed by any combination see the means to extricate himself from the perils that were encompassing him. There was something about his grandfather that defied persuasion. Prone as eloquent youth generally is to believe in the resistless power of its appeals, Coningsby despaired at once of ever moving Lord Monmouth. There had been a callous dryness in his manner, an unswerving purpose in his spirit, that at once baffled all attempts at influence. Nor could Coningsby forget the look he received when he quitted the room. There was no possibility of mistaking it. It said at once, without periphrasis, "Cross my purpose, and I will crush you." This was the moment when the sympathy, if not the counsels, of friendship might have been grateful. A clever woman might have afforded even more than sympathy; some happy device that might have even released him from the mesh in which he was involved. And once Coningsby had turned his horse's head to Park Lane to call on Lady Everingham. But surely, if there were a sacred secret in the world, it was the one which subsisted between himself and Edith. No, that must never be violated. Then there was Lady Wallinger; he could at least speak with freedom to her. He resolved to tell her all. He looked in for a moment at a club to take up the Court Guide and find her direction. A few men were standing in a bow window. He heard Mr. Cassilis say, "So Beau, they say, is booked at last. The new beauty, have you heard?" "I saw him very sweet on her last night," rejoined his companion. "Has she any tin?" "Deuced deal, they say," replied Mr. Cassilis. "The father is a cotton lord, and they all have loads of tin, you know. Nothing like them now." "He is in Parliament, is not he?" "Gad, I believe he is," said Mr. Cassilis. "I never know who is in Parliament these days. I remember when there were only 10 men in the House of Commons who were not either members of Books or this place. Everything is so deuced changed." "I hear 'tis an old affair of Beau," said another gentleman. "It was all done a year ago at Rome or Paris." "They say she refused him then," said Mr. Cassilis. "Well, that is tolerably cool for a manufacturer's daughter," said his friend. "What next?" "I wonder how the Duke likes it," said Mr. Cassilis. "Or the Duchess," added one of his friends. "Or the Everinghams," added the other. "The Duke will be deuced glad to see Beau settled, I take it," said Mr. Cassilis. "A good deal depends on the tin," said his friend. Coningsby threw down the Court Guide with a sinking heart. In spite of every insuperable difficulty, hitherto the end and object of all his aspirations and all his exploits, sometimes even almost unconsciously to himself, was Edith. It was over. The strange manner of last night was fatally explained. The heart that had once been his was now another's. To the man who still loves there is that conviction the most profound and desolate sorrow of which our nature is capable. All the recollection of the past, all the once cherished prospects of the future, blend into one bewildering anguish. Coningsby quitted the club, and mounting his horse, rode rapidly out of town, almost unconscious of his direction. He found himself at length in a green lane near Williston, silent and undisturbed. He pulled up his horse, and summoned all his mind to the contemplation of his prospects. Edith was lost. Now, should he return to his grandfather, accept his mission, and go down to Darlford on Friday? Favour and fortune, power, prosperity, rank, distinction, would be the consequence of this step. Might not he add even vengeance? Was there to be no term to his endurance? Might not he teach this proud, prejudiced manufacturer, with all his virulence and despotic caprices, a memorable lesson? And his daughter, too, this betrothed, after all, of a young noble, with her flush futurity of splendour and enjoyment, was she to hear of him only, if indeed she heard of him at all, as of one toiling or trifling in the humbler positions of existence, and wonder with a blush that he could ever have been the hero of her romantic girlhood? What degradation in the idea! His cheek burned at the possibility of such ignominy. It was a conjuncture in his life that required decision. He thought of his companions, who looked up to him with such ardent anticipations of his fame, of delight in his career, and confidence in his leading. Were all these high and fond fancies to be balked? On the very threshold of life was he to blunder? 'Tis the first step that leads to all, and his was to be a wilful error. He remembered his first visit to his grandfather, and the delight of his friends at Eton at his report on his return. After 8 years of initiation, was he to lose the favour then so highly prized, when the results which they had so long counted on were on the very eve of accomplishment? Parliament and riches and rank and power. These were facts, realities, substances that none could mistake. Was he to sacrifice them for speculations, theories, shadows, perhaps the vapours of a green and conceited brain? No, by heaven, no! He was like Caesar by the starry river's side, watching the image of the planets on his fatal waters. The die was cast. The sun set, the twilight spell fell upon his soul, the exaltation of his spirit died away. Beautiful thoughts, full of sweetness and tranquillity and consolation, came clustering round his heart like seraphs. He thought of Edith in her hours of fondness. He thought of the pure and solemn moments when to mingle his name with the heroes of humanity was his aspiration, and to achieve immortal fame the inspiring purpose of his life. What were the tawdry accidents of vulgar ambition to him? No domestic despot could deprive him of his intellect, his knowledge, the sustaining power of an unpolluted conscience. If he possessed the intelligence in which he had confidence, the world would recognise his voice, even if not placed upon a pedestal. If the principles of his philosophy were true, the great heart of the nation would respond to their expression. Coningsby felt at this moment a profound conviction which never again deserted him, that the conduct which would violate the affections of his heart, or the dictates of the conscience, however it may lead to immediate success, is a fatal error. Conscious that he was perhaps verging on some painful vicissitude of his life, he devoted himself to a love that seemed hopeless, and to a fame that was perhaps a dream. It was under the influence of these solemn resolutions that he wrote, on his return home, a letter to Lord Monmouth, in which he expressed all that affection which he really felt for his grandfather, and all the pangs which it cost him to adhere to the conclusions he had already announced. In terms of tenderness and even humility, he declined to become a candidate for Darlford, or even to enter Parliament, except as the master of his own conduct. Chapter 5. Lady Monmouth was reclining on a sofa in that beautiful boudoir which had been fitted up under the superintendence of Mr. Rigby, but, as he then believed, for the Princess Colonna. The walls were hung with amber satin, painted by Delaroche, with such subjects as might be expected from his brilliant and picturesque pencil. Fair forms, heroes and heroines in dazzling costume, the offspring of chivalry merging into what is commonly styled civilisation, moved in graceful or fantastic groups amid palaces and gardens. The ceiling, carved in the deep honeycomb fashion of the Saracens, was richly gilt and picked out in violet. Upon a violet carpet of velvet was represented the marriage of Cupid and Psyche. It was about 2 hours after Coningsby had quitted Monmouth House, and Flora came in, sent for by Lady Monmouth, as was her custom, to read to her as she was employed with some light work. "'Tis a new book of Sioux," said Lucretia. "They say it is good." Flora, seated by her side, began to read. Reading was an accomplishment which distinguished Flora. But to day her voice faltered, her expression was uncertain. She seemed but imperfectly to comprehend her page. More than once Lady Monmouth looked round at her with an inquisitive glance. Suddenly Flora stopped and burst into tears. "Oh, madam," she at last exclaimed, "if you would but speak to Mr. Coningsby, all might be right." "What is this?" said Lady Monmouth, turning quickly on the sofa. Then, collecting herself in an instant, she continued with less abruptness and more suavity than usual. "Tell me, Flora, what is it? What is the matter?" "My lord," sobbed Flora, "has quarrelled with Mr. Coningsby." An expression of eager interest came over the countenance of Lucretia. "Why have they quarrelled?" "I do not know they have quarrelled. It is not perhaps a right term, but my lord is very angry with Mr. Coningsby." "Not very angry, I should think, Flora. And about what?" "Oh, very angry, madam," said Flora. shaking her head mournfully. 'My lord told Monsieur Villebecque that perhaps Mr. Coningsby would never enter the house again.' 'Was it to day?' asked Lucretia. 'This morning. Mr. Coningsby has only left this hour or two. He will not do what my lord wishes about some seat in the Chamber. I do not know exactly what it is, but my lord is in one of his moods of terror. My father is frightened even to go into his room when he is so.' 'Has Mr. Rigby been here to day?' asked Lucretia. 'Mr. Rigby is not in town. My father went for Mr. Rigby this morning, before Mr. Coningsby came, and he found that Mr. Rigby was not in town. That is why I know it.' Lady Monmouth rose from her sofa, and walked once or twice up and down the room. Then, turning to Flora, she said, 'Go away now. The book is stupid. It does not amuse me. Stop. Find out all you can for me about the quarrel before I speak to Mr. Coningsby.' Flora quitted the room. Lucretia remained for some time in meditation. Then she wrote a few lines, which she despatched at once to Mr. Rigby. CHAPTER VI.